Hey guys, just wanted to welcome you here today. So what we're going to be doing is we've had a lot of questions come in regarding the Optic plate system, and it's very important that the Optic is installed properly on the plate and then connecting the plate to the slide. If it's not installed properly, you can run into issues of breaking screws, screws coming loose down the line, and just overall accuracy of the gun. If the screws come loose or isn't installed properly and your Optic comes loose, then that'll shift your zero. All the stuff that we have here today, you have your little kit bag that comes in your zippered pocket in the black carry case. I pulled out our different Optic plates that it comes with, as well as our screw kit. And then as far as the necessary tools, you're going to need a torque wrench, something that is able to hit a 12 inch-pound torque spec. I've got a little plastic bullet, but this is going to help us in removing the slide. And then we've got our Allen keys that come in the same kit as well. So first off, we want to make sure that the firearm is unloaded and safe to operate. You want to visually check the chamber to make sure nothing's inserted. I'm going to set that mag off to the side. Now that we've figured out that the firearm is unloaded and safe, we're going to remove the slide from the frame for ease of install. So basically there's this little half moon notch that you need to line up on your slide stop. We're going to use, you can use a plastic punch or something. I'm just using the little bullet and find that that's easiest for me. So that's how you remove the slide stop. Once that's removed, you're going to slide the slide off of the frame. To disassemble the toolless guide rod, this is our TWC black model. The toolless guide rod's on the TWC black and the TWC hex. To remove that, you're going to push that forward, and there's this little square here, push down, that's going to pop that post up. Once that's engaged, it's going to self-contain itself. If you kind of pop that a little bit and remove that, make sure that the link is flipped down to slide the barrel out. Once the slide is field stripped, I've got a bench block here that's just going to help us keep everything nice and steady while we're working on the slide. So first we're going to go through and remove the cover plate, which will be installed on the firearm straight out the box. You have two Allen keys that come with all the TWCs. You've got a T10 and then a 332nd. Your 332nd Allen key is for your frame screws. We're going to use the T10 and then take off the two screws that are holding the cover plate to the slide. And so now that we got those screws out, you're going to lift up on the plate, and then feel free to wipe any of that extra oil off. And then we're going to identify what Optic plate we need for our Optic. In your little kit bag, you will have the little Optic fitment matrix. It's going to have what screws you need and the Optic footprint, and then a few popular optics to use. Today we're going to be installing the Holosun 507C. So you're going to find the Optic right here. It's going to use the RMR plate, and the fastener to install the Optic to the plate is going to be the 440 by 280 FHB screws. So first we will grab the RMR plate. And then in the kit bag, we have the screw kit. The TWC black and hex models might have an extra screw kit for some of the other plates. So just make sure you look through both to find the screws that you need. So here are our 440 by 280 FHB screws. And then we're also going to need the 440 by 1/4 inch screws to mount the plate to the slide. The last thing that you will need are these silver T-nuts. These will get installed between the plate and the slide itself. The easiest way to install plate and T-nuts is to flip the plate upside down, and you'll see the little rectangle that these will drop into. And since nothing's holding those in, we're going to take the slide and hold it upside down or at an angle while we line up the plate. So now you'll have those two little T-posts sticking up slightly. You want to make sure that the slide and the Optic plate are sitting flushly and there's nothing obstructing it. So So we're gonna set that back and pull out these 440 by 1/4 inch screws. And even though the supplied screws have blue Loctite pre-applied, just to be on the safe side, since sometimes those can be a little dried out, we're gonna apply a little bit of extra blue Loctite on top of that. You don't need much, it does go a long ways. Just a drop, and that's all you need. So to start, we're just gonna take that, go ahead and get them kind of screwed in just to be hand tight, just so it keeps everything in place for right now. So once those are just slightly snug, we're gonna go ahead and grab our torque tool. You're gonna torque these down to 12 inch-pounds. This one is from Fix-It Sticks. It's their universal one, so we're just gonna watch, make sure that that gets down to 12. If your torque wrench is one that you can set the exact torque spec, then you're gonna wanna set that to 12 inch-pounds. So as we just tighten that down, get it a little more snug and all the way seated. And then once those are snug, then we're gonna go and look to, then we're gonna actually torque them to spec. So there's 12 inch-pounds there. And there's 12 inch-pounds there. One thing that will be helpful during the process of cleaning your firearm is to witness mark your screws, so you can kind of keep an eye on them. So I've got just a white paint pen. A normal Sharpie works fine, especially the silver ones. So we're just gonna do a little line there. So then if I ever have to remove the optic, especially if it's one where the battery's beneath the optic, you can make sure that your screws haven't backed out at all. So now that we've got the plate mounted securely to the slide, I'm gonna wanna go ahead and take our optic and set that on the plate, make sure it's all the way seated and in place. There is a little bit of room that it can move, just because it's not fastened down all the way. We're gonna take the 440 by 280 screws, since that's what the Holosun 507C and 507 comp call for. It's really important that you use the correct screws to hold the optic in place, as there is a variety of screws. If it's too short, that can lead to some issues of damaging the T-nut fastener. And if it's too long, it's possible it could bottom out prematurely and not sit the optic flush. So now that we've got this, I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing as before and place a little bit of extra blue Loctite on top of the pre-applied Loctite and come in and go ahead and start to get those snugged up. One thing that is very important, especially on the RMR plate, is the plate is not completely enclosed, so your T-nut is able to spin outward. And if the T-nut spins outwards, it's not gonna be sitting flush and can cause damage to it, which in turn will either cause your slide or your optic to come loose from the slide, or the T-nut to break itself. So basically the easiest way with the RMR plate is, once your screws are installed to keep everything in place, if you hold the optic upside down, you can see how that's kind of kicking out sideways. If you could take your fingernail and kind of hold it somewhat in place while you go to tighten it up a little bit more snug. Once you get past that point, it's gonna hold it in place, but just starting it is where it might have an issue of wanting to kick out on you. So same thing with the other side. You're gonna wanna hold your fingernail in place while you tighten up. So now that those T-nuts are sucked inside the optic in their respective places, we can flip the optic back straight, go in, and now we can tighten everything down and go ahead and torque those to 12 inch-pounds right there. And then same thing with the other side. And as previously mentioned, it is very important that the screws are torqued to spec. If you torque them beyond spec, you run the risk of breaking the screw. And if you don't torque it to spec, then the optic can come loose and you'll have other fitment issues. So same as before, whenever we mounted the plate to the slide and witness marking those screws, we want to do the same thing to the screws on the optic, holding that in place. And in doing so, every time you clean your gun, it's going to be good to go in and check to make sure that your screws have not backed out. So if you notice your screws back out, then you're going to want to remount your optic, make sure that everything's done properly, and then torque to spec again. But now that the optic is secured, there's no wiggle whenever you go to move it. That's going to be your first telltale sign that you did something wrong. So our optic is mounted properly, there is no movement, everything's torqued to spec. We're going to go ahead and look and make sure the optic's on, and you can kind of line up the reticle to your front sight or to your iron sights. And that's going to be a good way to make sure that you are at least on paper whenever you go to the range to actually test fire it and zero it in properly. So hopefully that'll save you a little bit on ammo. So now that everything looks lined up there, we're good to go ahead and install the components back in the slide and get the slide put back on the frame. So you're gonna flip everything upside down. Make sure your barrel link is in the down position. Slide your barrel in, flip that link up. And one thing to make sure of whenever you go to install your reverse bull plug is that the fully supported bull plug is in line with the same crescent shape on the back side of the guide rod. So that ours is lined up properly. So now we'll go ahead and install this. Make sure that the reverse plug goes all the way in, release tension, and basically falls together. Now that your slide is assembled, go ahead, grab the frame. Make sure that your guide rod is pushed all the way up against the barrel. Sometimes it wants to drop down a little bit. That might make it a little difficult getting the slide back on. So now that slide is back on the frame, we're gonna line up the link pin. It might be helpful to take a small pin punch or a pair of tweezers to get everything lined up in there properly. We're gonna take our slide stop, insert that in, hold everything in place. Move the slide towards the rear and line up the half moon relief cut. And then get your slide stop lined up and push in. Now that everything's in place and installed, go ahead, rack it a few times, function check it, make sure everything's happy, there's no grittiness in your slide or any big hang up. So all that's very important for the durability and longevity of the firearm. So now that the optic is properly mounted, you're ready to go hit the range and get everything zeroed in properly. Feel free to check out some more information from our website, jacobgrayfirearms.com, and send us an email if you have another question, or feel free to give us a call.